Well, thank you for having me. I'm always delighted to be invited to speak. I brought 3 people with me today, figuring that they were going to be the only 3 people here, so I'm very pleased. Well, although my topic is the economy and the environment, let me preempt a couple of questions that I know are going to come up. I feel like David Letterman do in the top 10, and these are frequently asked questions, and we'll get to the economy and the environment. The first and most frequently asked question is, how in the heck did you ever get this job? And it's a good question, because people ask me continuously what my relationship to Pat McCrory was historically, and the answer is 0. Governor McCrory didn't know me from Adam's house cat. I'd met him 2 times briefly, once at about a 3-minute fundraiser in Pinehurst, and once when he came to our company, Restoration Systems, because he wanted to learn about environmental restoration and mitigation and environmental issues. And although I was the CEO of that company, my 2 partners were founders, and I pushed them to the front. They had founded this organization, and it was their time to be able to explain to the governor, before he was governor, what this environmental thing was all about. So I took a very large back seat. So my name emerged, as best I can tell, through the transition team, as someone who had been knocked down every flight of stairs in the business sector. You asked my wife what I do, and Terry was kind enough to highlight some of the things. If you ask my wife, she says, "What day of the week is it?" But I've actually had some pretty fascinating runs, and I've been the most lucky person in the world with the things that I have been able to experience, from healthcare to aviation to the practice of law. And it has been truly fascinating. But anyway, I got a call to come and interview with the governor, and spent about an hour with him after he was elected. Then got to meet some of the transition team folks for about an hour, and a week later I get a call. And you talk about putting your foot in your mouth. It was a Friday night, and as a matter of fact, I was on my way to the Wyrick Robbins Christmas party, which has become an icon for 30 years. And I remember jumping in the car, looking at my cell, and seeing I had a missed call from a 704 area code, and I thought it was a friend of mine from Charlotte. So I called back, didn't even listen to the voicemail or anything, and gave some really flippant, "Hey, how you doing?" Turkey kind of thing. And he says, "John, this is Pat McCrory." And I said, "Oh, geez, that's a great way to." I figured that was the kiss of death at that point in time. And he said, "I'd like you to become the dean or secretary." And I said, "Well, Governor, I'm very flattered, and I'm certainly honored to do so." He said, "I have 2 criteria for you." He said, 1, you must protect the environment. And he said, 2, you've got to help us regrow, rebuild this economy, because we're in trouble. And I said, "Governor, I understand the mission. I get it. I'm on board. I have 1 criteria for you. I have 1 prerequisite. And that is, you need to give me the latitude and the authority to hire the very, very best people I can. And I'm not so much looking at party affiliation. I'm looking at people who get the message that we've got to protect the environment and have to grow the economy." And he said, "You got it. You go get the very best people you can." And one thing I've learned in my many years in business and being knocked down all those flights of stairs is that the best way to succeed, and certainly my ticket to whatever success I have been able to achieve, meager as that might have been, is you surround yourself with people better than you are. And that's exactly what I did. And for those of you that followed it in any shape or form, and some of my folks are here, Neil Robbins is here, my legislative liaison, I got out of the chute fast, very fast. And I probably announced my crowd 2 months before anybody else. But part of it was because I had some embedded knowledge as to who I wanted. In my role as CEO at Restoration Systems, we dealt with Diener. And I think that's what helped seal it for the governor, in that I had some fairly deep experience with the EEP section, the Ecosystem Enhancement Program section of Diener. So I at least had a pretty good feel of what it was all about. And I knew how Diener operated, and I knew that that operation wasn't necessarily compatible with protecting the environment and growing the economy. I knew that there were efficiencies that needed to be gained, and I also knew that, and I just said this to our esteemed reporter from the NNO here, John Morosky, that just because it's always been that way doesn't necessarily make it the right way. Because whether we like it or not, we've had 135 years of same party control in the state of North Carolina. And whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, or whether you're a CEO of a company or a chairman of a board, I have always been of the belief that you do need fresh eyes occasionally. And it's always good to get a different perspective. And so when I got to Diener, I certainly learned that that had been the case. Everything had been vetted institutionally. That we had 4,000 employees, and I looked at the organizational chart, and 4,000 employees reported to one person, and that was below the secretary. Everybody has a deputy in state government. And I said, well, I don't need a deputy. I need to run this operation. That is what I was brought here to do, is be an operator. I know how to run companies. And so we don't have a deputy at Diener. And I flatten the organization. And I have a number of direct reports. And I'm involved in knowing what everybody is doing at all the time. Maybe someday I will need a deputy. But right now I've had to trade off chicken dinners and cutting ribbons for running a company. We have 4,000 employees and about $1 billion budget, a little bit less than $1 billion budget. And what we found when we got here, and I'll get back to Diener in just a second, is more problem financially in state government than anybody realized. To give you a little bit of a for instance, the governor's original budget was $20.6 billion, roughly $21 billion. And if everything went correctly, if that budget were approved and everything went correctly, at the end of the first year, we would have had a $100 million surplus and zero rainy day fund. Texas, by the way, has an $8 billion rainy day fund. And if you divide 100 million by 21 billion, it's 0.0000 something, but it's not a big number. You couldn't run your household that closely. That was the governor's proposed budget. In the first 30 days, we knew that there was $162 million in Medicaid unpaid bills that had been carried over from the Perdue administration. In the first 30 days, I think we found another $192 million in surprises. And by the time the budget was approved, I don't have a detailed handle on the number, but that number is somewhere between $500 million and $1 billion. I'm going to go with the 500 million plus the 162. So Medicaid alone provided $500 million in surprises on the $21 billion budget. Big number. Surprises that nobody knew about. So there goes the $100 million reserve fund. There goes raises for teachers and state employees. There's no money, folks. Let me give you a couple of examples of just things that we have come across. North Carolina right now, I don't know if the statistic came out today. Has Commerce released the latest unemployment data?
Yes.
What is it?
So
8.9%? Okay, it was 8.8 last month. It's 8.9 now. Well, if you combine that with the underemployment or the shadow unemployment, and Mr. Hood back there is an expert on this one, I think the latest thing I read from John was we're running about 15.7% real unemployment in the state of North Carolina. We are the 5th highest unemployment state in the United States of America. But to go back to some of our surprises, In 2004, for instance, Department of Health and Human Services signed a contract for $285 million to create a new Medicaid processing system. That system is called NC Tracks, which those of you that have followed just went live this 4th of July weekend, 10 years later. Our cost in that system is over $500 million. And here's the kicker, folks. Some of us in this room are old enough to remember college, where you saw the computer science people walking around with these little punch cards. And they'd steal time in the computer lab at 3 in the morning. Those punch cards were a system called COBOL, a 1950 software language. This contract that was signed in 2004 for $285 million, which is 10 years late and $500 million, is programmed in COBOL. The only engineers available in the world to service this system are in India. And I could spend the next 2 days telling you stories like this. For instance, we'll play guessing game here for a second. Some of you have heard this, don't answer. How many unique IT platforms operate the state of North Carolina right now, not counting the court system, Justice Newby, and the university system? How many unique IT platforms are we operating under that we know about right now? How many do you think we need to run the state of North Carolina? 5? How about 950? The original number was 887. It's up to 950, and I'm told that it could get up to 2,500. Now, maybe we need 50 or 100. Pick a number. How do you abrogate 950 contracts? We are contractually committed to 950 contracts. Head of IT told me the other day, he said, we just looked at one that came up for renewal because these contracts generally get renewed for 3-year periods. It was a small one. It was only $250,000 a year. It had been renewed 5 times for 15 years for $250,000. And it was up for renewal. So they took a look at it and found out nobody in state government uses it, but they were ready to renew it. It's broken, folks. It's broken. $1.7 billion in IT projects underway with 5 people overseeing them. Beth Wood, the state auditor, did an audit of 84 IT projects just at the beginning of the year. $356 million over budget and 389 days late, average. This NC Tracks program that I told you about, the COBOL program, has to service 88 million claims a year for 70,000 providers for 1.5 million Medicaid recipients. And we're operating under a system that you have to go to India to get a programmer to fix it. So, when you take that and combine it with what I found at Diener, very much the same thing. As I said to John, just because it's been there for 135 years doesn't make it the right way. We've got 15 reorganizations going on in Diener right now. Obviously, the newspaper wants to know, oh my God, is this going to be massive layoffs? No, I don't contemplate any massive layoffs. I'm not in there for political reasons. I'm in there as an operator. I guess historically, new people came in and new people took their place. The governor's commitment to me was I could hire the best people. I've got a business to run. I've got a 4,000-person billion-dollar budget to run with 29 or 30 different divisions. We owe it to each other to run that as efficiently as we possibly can. Now, everybody says, here's the other assumption. Oh my God, you're going to run it efficiently, then you're going to relax environmental regulation. Oh, the economy is so important that the environment just goes away. Could be the farthest thing from the truth. The second day I was there, I promulgated a new mission statement for Diener that's drawn some question, at least it did initially. And it really focuses on three fundamental things. Number one, we are all stewards of the environment. Number two, we are all taxpayers and citizens. Why do they have to be at mutually exclusive odds with each other? They don't. Because the new mission statement says, as stewards of the environment, we've got to do three things. Number one, whether you're in Diener or whether you're in any other agency of state government, but this focused on Diener, we're a service organization, folks. We are public servants. But we've changed the philosophy. Historically, the philosophy has been that corporate America is the enemy. And that Diener's job was to be an environmental enforcer, an eco-enforcer. And they met you at the door, and their job was to make your life as difficult as possible to get your permit. The governor quips about the fact that he appointed the HHS secretary and me first because we had the biggest mountain to climb. We had the most difficulty. Well, the reality is Diener was considered, certainly by the state legislature and probably by the business community, as the number one obstacle to growth in the state of North Carolina. Because as we all know, from an environmental perspective, you can make things very tough. What was Diener doing? Diener was making permit applicants negotiate against themselves. So you come in with a permit application, and you get rejected, you get rejected, you get rejected, until at such time you finally have made the king happy, and the king says, okay, 18 or 24 or 36 months later, you get your permit. Interestingly enough, the first week I was at Diener, I get a call from the governor's office, and I could tell by the tone of the call it wasn't a good one. He said, can you come up to the office? And I said, sure. And I get to the office, and I was greeted by a room full of people, including the chairman of Ashley Furniture. And Ashley Furniture is the largest furniture manufacturer in the United States of America. 30,000 employees, 11 locations, including several overseas, 2 in California, 2 in Mississippi, 1 in Florida, 1 in Pennsylvania. And he had purchased an old RJR plant in Davie County in Advance, North Carolina. Now, his vision was to have 3 million square feet of manufacturing distribution space and 2,000 employees in this location. Pretty nice vision. We could use 2,000 new jobs. So I walk into this room, and my premonition about it not being a good call was correct. It was not a friendly environment. It was a pretty hostile environment. And there was the chairman of Ashley, his general counsel, his head engineer, the governor, chief of staff, and a whole cadre of folks. And basically, he gives me the overall statistics about 3 million square feet, 2,000 jobs. And then he looks me in the eye and says, I just want you to know, North Carolina is the hardest place in the United States I've ever done business. To which my knees went weak because I said, California? I said, you can't step left and step right in California without hitting an endangered species of some kind. He said, yeah, California. They had basically been at the permitting process for over 18 months in North Carolina. I don't recall the hard number, but I think it was a tune of about $1 million they were into engineering and consultant. And they were coming up on a deadline, a hard deadline, where they were going to lose some of their economic development grants if they didn't get the permits issued and their construction underway. So effectively, he had been negotiating, he'd made 9 submittals to Diener for his permits. So effectively, Diener had required them to spend $1 million and negotiate against themselves for 18 to 24 months, and they were on the verge of disaster, and they were ready to leave. So I got everybody together, and I said, wait a minute. I got the Diener folks, and I said, wait a minute. What's the difference in outcome in making them spend 24 months and $1 million working through our maze versus us taking them by the hand the day they come in with their permit and say, look, we're not going to allow you to break the rules, but we're going to help you through the maze because we know the rules better than anybody. And that's effectively what we did. In about 90 days, we got the permits issued. They had the big groundbreaking. Everybody is happy, and Davie County, North Carolina is going to get 2,000 new jobs. And it went so well that they're talking about moving equipment from China to Davie County and growing that plant even further. Now, we didn't change the rules. We didn't change the regulations. We didn't relax anything, which is always the assumption. My God, you've got to grow the economy. You're going to relax the environmental rules. No, we're not. As a matter of fact, in some cases, we're going to strengthen rules. I'm sure all of you have seen in the newspaper. We've brought effectively 14 enforcement actions against Duke Power. Nobody in the history of the state of North Carolina has ever brought an enforcement action against a utility. That's not relaxing the rules. But what we've done is we've recognized that to build the economy, we can't take the people that are going to build the economy and make them the enemy. I've met with dozens and dozens of companies in the last 7 months, and not one has said, cheat for me or bend the rules or do something special. And they're delighted we're helping them through the maze. I've met with dozens of environmental groups, all of whom come in presuming that we're going to relax the rules. And my first comment to them, semi-tongue-in-cheek, is I'm glad you're here wearing a suit and a dress and so forth, and you drove here in a car. Because if you took all the dots that you articulate from all the environmental groups and connect them all together and everybody gets what they want, we would live in lean-tos and wear loincloths. And they don't want that either. But nobody ever thinks of what the common ground is to make this economy move forward, because we must. We cannot bankrupt our state. And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, unless we get Medicaid under control, we can bankrupt our state. We need to get the efficiency in state government correct. What we have should not be presumed that it's the right model. So what are we doing at Diener? Well, 15 reorganizations across the board. Diener is a bifurcated organization. Half is the regulatory side, air, water, ground, permits. And then the other half is what I thought was the fun side, which is museums and zoos and aquariums. And they're not so much fun either. We have 20 million visitors to our parks, our zoos, our museums, our aquariums. They are very dependent, especially the zoos and the aquariums and museum, on societal support, separate organizations. And there's been a lot of talk about public-private partnerships for the zoos and the museums and the aquariums. And after having had 7 months to look at it, a public-private partnership today is an abdication of what our obligation is. I'm not saying it's not ultimately the right solution, but the reality is we need to figure out how we're going to run our zoos and our aquariums and our museums correctly. And then we can determine whether we even need a public-private partnership, because I'm not so sure we do. We've got good people. We just need to give them the parameters and give them the opportunity to operate correctly, including the relationship with these societies. Because one thing I've learned with the societies, they're 501c3 independent organizations. They think they run the zoo. It's a state and saying they think they run the aquariums. So we're getting to the bottom of that, slowly but surely. We can't get it done overnight. But effectively, we have got the opportunity to protect the environment and to grow the economy without reducing regulation. As I said to the environmental groups, who wants dirty water and dirty air? Nobody. You go to Beijing, they wear masks. They have sacrificed the environment for the economy because people want to wear blue jeans and eat steaks. We're not to that point. We don't have to. We've got all we need right here to have clean water, clean air, to have companies organically grow themselves internally and companies to move to the state of North Carolina. You'll have to research this, John, but I have heard, and I've heard it through sources at Commerce, that we lose head-to-head in economic recruitment to the state of South Carolina 77% of the time. We're better than South Carolina, folks. We got better stuff. We got better mountains. We're better than South Carolina. We shouldn't lose 77% of the time. Why? Because they are certainly more customer friendly. So, two other components to the mission statement. Customer service. We are a service organization. Doesn't mean we have to sacrifice standards. Secondly, everything we do at Diener has to include some consideration of fundamental economics. It's not a perfect fit. You can't do a cost-benefit analysis. Heck, there's nothing that's a perfect fit for cost-benefit. But we at least need to give consideration to the fact. What did Thomas Sowell say? Government's the only place where the slightest benefit gets paid for no matter what the cost. We can't do that. There has to be trade-offs. There has to be times when you have to say, it is not worth the cost. We've caught a lot of flack for something called the Jordan Lake Rules. The Jordan Lake Rules is basically a mitigation offset program where billions of dollars will have to be spent to offset nutrients that flow into Jordan Lake. And these rules have been underway for a long, long time. What we did this year was say, look, let's call time out. We're not going to suspend any rules. We're not going to go backwards. But there's potentially technology that a fraction of the cost of the classic nutrient offset mitigation program that might be able to do the same thing. Let's test it and see. We're not going to go backward, but if we could save 90 cents on the dollar on billions of dollars, doesn't that benefit everybody in the state of North Carolina and still protect the environment? Those are the kind of things we need to think of. And last but not least, and again, something that we have been maligned and caught flack over, is fundamental science. You know, everybody wants to know what my position on global warming is. Here you go, John. Ned Barnett came and asked me the same question. I said, it's a disservice for me to have a position on global warming. Diener is a community of science. I've got 2,000 plus scientists in my organization. I'm not a scientist. I don't know what the answer is. But what I can do is I can demand that our 2,000 scientists at least are aware of all the aspects of the argument, whether it be global warming or whether it be defibrillators for people that have had heart attacks in the park. When I talk about fundamental science, everybody just runs to global warming when in fact there's thousands of other scientific things that we need to be aware of. Don't you want your park ranger defibrillating you with the best scientific techniques that are available? All I'm demanding from people at Diener is that they look me in the eye and say that they are familiar with all the aspects and then make an enlightened decision based on full knowledge. That is their job, and it's my responsibility to make sure that they accommodate all those points of view. Nothing radical about that. Matter of fact, I think as a taxpayer and a citizen, that's what the least you would demand. So Diener has been a rocket ride, folks. It's been absolutely amazing. There's a lot of very smart people. There's a lot of very committed people. And as a matter of fact, there's a lot of people at Diener that see the world just like I do, but they haven't been given the opportunity to think outside the box. We are leading the state in a variety of things, including number of reorganizations. Neil will tell you we've got the place upside down. We are leading the state in the creation of a performance management system. And automatically, again, the flack comes. You know, oh, performance management. Management thinks, oh God, more paperwork, and the employees say, oh, they're coming to get me. No, our performance management is going to be different. Ours is going to be a ground up. You know, there's articles about the number of exempt employees Diener has. I think it was published that we have, on a percentage basis, twice any other agency in the state. And you know what my answer to that is? My exempt employees are my leaders. I want people that are going to step up and say, I am so good, I don't have to worry about being let go for any reason, because I'm going to show you that I can help be transformative to this organization, that I can be a leader in your organization and show you how I can take my years of experience and show you how we can do it better. Since that list came out last Friday, we've had people coming in asking to be on the list because they want to be a leader in the organization. This isn't about politics. This isn't about bureaucracy. This is about getting people to step up and do what's necessary for the taxpayers of North Carolina to protect the environment and run this business correctly. That's all I know how to do, folks. I can't think about it politically. But I have an affirmative and a fiduciary obligation to every one of you to do it correctly to the best of our ability. And I'm getting leaders in place that'll do that. And we're having fun. We're having fun. When things are badly broken, as I always said, is when I turn around companies, you look real good if they're badly broken because you can make some gains real quick. It's hard once you fix them to make those kind of gains. But we're having a great time. And our performance management is going to be just that. It's going to be bottom up. It's going to be up to the employee to make sure that their file is documented with how good they are. You want to grow in my organization? You come tell me. This isn't going to be burdensome. This is going to be an epiphany for most of these folks. It's a great challenge and it's great fun. And we're doing it for you, folks. I can tell you unequivocally we are doing it. We are transforming the face of that agency in state government, which I hope will help transform all of state government. There's a lot of room. There's a lot of upside, and we've got to quit being the 5th highest unemployment state in the United States. That 15.7% unemployment is not acceptable. And we're going to fix it, because we are. And it's only because I've surrounded myself with people better than I am, and they can certainly get the job done. So with that said, I will be happy to answer any questions you have. And I'm sure we could go on for 3 or 4 days about all the things we found. But and I do appreciate you coming. I'm truly touched that this many people came. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for coming here. I really appreciate it. My name is Chris Mealy. I'm a county commissioner in Pamlico County, home of Oriental, sailing capital of North Carolina.
And you've got a plant going in, a quarry going in down there that's going to flow into Blunt's Creek, right?
This is a plea from rural coastal county. We would really appreciate not having a repeat of a nightmare experience that we had several years ago, where an employee of Diener unilaterally reinterpreted a rule that would have resulted in the loss, use of undeveloped waterfront property in all 20 coastal counties. Property that had been platted, purchased, and paid for years before. If we desire economic development, we would like to be assured that a low-level employee cannot impact the development of private property in such a way again.
You have my unequivocal assurance. I can assure you that will not happen in this. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a couple little ditties along those lines. And I don't know if you had a permit application or whatever as a rule interpretation. But just on the permit application side, the way it worked at Diener is that an application could be submitted, and I think it was 30 or 45 days that if the application didn't move forward in that time, it was automatically approved. Well, the trick was to wait to the 44th day and ask for more information. And that goes on for 2 years. Yep, I'm hearing some agreement to that. Well, there's a new rule in Diener now First time there's an extension, it goes to the supervisor, division director's desk. Second time an extension, it comes to me. I haven't seen one yet. So I can assure you that that is not going to be the case. That's not the balance of fundamental economics. That's not the economic test. If there's environmental reasons that needs to be considered, that's one thing, but it has to be balanced with the economic benefit. And I can assure you, no unilateral employee, no single employee is going to make that decision. Well, I apologize. I think it was probably before I got there. Okay. Roy.
There was an interesting article this morning in News Observer, actually having to do with British regulations driving demand for these wood pellets
Right.
in North Carolina. I mean, if they want to have stupid regulations like rural North Carolina, it's fine. But one of the things that came out in that article I thought was interesting is that there's actually significant controversy as to whether not just wood, but other bioenergy sources are good for the environment, that they may not be carbon neutral. That matters to whoever. It doesn't too much to me, but that they are polluting in other ways. And of course, we have our SB3 with mandates. I think not to the same extent, but going a similar route to Great Britain. The mandates that we use a lot of these, including wood and so on. Are there people at DINA looking at the question of are these things that are mandated that we use in the area of biomass actually helping the environment or hurting the environment, and looking at those conclusions? Because the presumption has been they're good for the environment.
Well, let me not step too far off the end of the platform. But as I understand the wood chip controversy, it's really got a couple of components, one of which is spraying them to keep them from being infested when they get to Europe. And apparently we've been spraying this stuff for years, and it's just now come to the fore that we're doing it in Morehead City, I guess is where they're going out of. Apparently they've been spraying in Wilmington for years, or vice versa. The second is, as I understand it, is that wood chips are carbon emitters like coal, but they're 3 times more expensive than coal. But because they're carbon emitters and it comes from wood, that's okay, because for whatever reason that carbon helps trees grow, because trees need carbon to grow. And I'm not sure I understand the scientific difference between this carbon and that carbon, but that's why it's been given a pass. And then as I also understand it, in Europe, they're using this instead of coal because they can sell the credits from this product to actually make money selling those carbon credits from wood chips. So whether the answer is to your question, I don't know if DINA is deeply involved in that at this point in time. I know the federal government's deeply involved in it because they're the ones, I think, that gave the original exemption to allow it to have a carbon pass. But I don't know if DINA's looking into it or not, Roy. It's kind of a new thing relative to the carbon. We've been more focused on the spraying the bugs to get the chips to Europe.
Just and that's in terms of our own mandate that we're using something, we could be mandating that we're using something that's actually
right. Yeah. And the answer is I don't think we're deep enough into it at this point in time. But the wood chips are becoming a very big business. And plants coming online all the time. I know we're getting a lot of requests for air quality permits. So we've been more focused on that than the pure carbon side of it. So, yes, sir.
Of course, with any economic development, costs of utilities such as electricity is an important issue. That's also an important issue for consumers. And North Carolina has a mandate. The Locke Foundation has done some good work on that, requiring utilities to use expensive forms of generation, so-called renewables, wind and solar, which are inefficient, partly because they're intermittent, and partly because the technology is not developed to produce electricity efficiently either way. What is the department doing to get rid of these costly mandates to help hold their electricity prices down for both economic development and consumer costs.
We are following the lead of the General Assembly, as Dr. Warren right there. I mean, right now it's mandated legally. Yeah, I mean that's and it certainly there was talk about reducing the percentage, and that did not get any traction in the General Assembly.
Well, the legislation was there to reverse this.
Right, and
Get in there and push to reverse it.
the department was pretty non-committal on the subject, because remember, every time you gore somebody's ox, somebody else benefits. Remember, this is a big issue here. Think about windmills. A lot of people don't like windmills. Counties love windmills. They collect taxes. Steel producers love windmills because they make steel. There's a lot of forces at work on the General Assembly saying yes, no, yes, no. I mean, you're right. You articulate a logical conclusion. But if you talk to somebody who's getting a county tax and you've got 100 county governments lobbying to say, wait a minute, we get revenue from that and we're starving to death, it's for smarter minds than mine to determine. But the General Assembly made the determination to leave that percentage alone. Yes, sir.
What about Alcoa?
What about Alcoa?
Tell us what's going on there. It looks like you all were going to permit them, and then this property ownership issue came up out of the blue. What's going on there?
Well, our job was never to determine property ownership. Diener's job was to look at the facts of the water quality. And we had spent a long time looking at the facts of the water quality. And it was one of these situations where we either had to issue a permit or deny a permit, and it was going to get issued automatically. And that deadline was fast approaching, and then the state of North Carolina brings a lawsuit to determine the ownership of the river bottom under the dam that produces the electricity. So basically what we did was just called timeout. We denied the permit with the caveat that if the river bottom ownership is determined, we would expedite the review of the permit and not put whoever the owner is back through the process. And as I understand it, the owner will either be Alcoa or the state of North Carolina. But if the state of North Carolina owns the river bottom, Alcoa owns the dam on top of it, so it'll probably be some kind of joint ownership. But that's, again, for bigger minds and minded. This is a legal issue, and all we did was call timeout, which was the right thing to do. So somebody give us some direction, and we'll make a decision on the water quality once we know who's the permit applicant. Because right now we're not sure. And this has been an issue that goes way back into the Purdue administration, and it was on and again and off again and so forth. So at least we're trying to bring some certainty. Doesn't everybody want certainty? This is an opportunity to try to bring certainty to the issue.
Well, if they will have to claim, the state will have to claim that they own the two Duke Hydro projects too then.
Unless Duke already has title.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. Duke might have title. The legal arguments that I've read and seen go all the way back to the King's Grant in umpty. I mean, this is a complicated legal issue that this gentleman here will probably, Justice Newby will probably have a shot at.
He wasn't listening.
Yeah. I don't blame him. Actually, I've been told that Alcoa wants to remove it to the federal courts. So how that all, ask the expert, because I tell you, it's way above my pay grade to figure that one out. So yes, sir.
I agree, as probably most of Peter does, most of the people in this room, with what you've done so far. In the third or fourth year of the administration, perhaps you could look at what trickles down from Washington. The National Anti-Air Quality Standards, for example. They're to be revised every 5 years. If you're developing SIPs to meet that every 5 years, adjusting permits to meet that every 5 years, that's an enormous burden. The states collectively are an important force in getting back to whatever administration and identifying the burdens. So there's a certain amount of efficiency which is under your control, and appropriately you dealt with that first. But being able to have an assessment of the consequences of these changes that are outside of your control may be something that you want to consider.
Although we very much are, and it's a great point. As a matter of fact, to that end, a number of the southern states especially have band together because no one state is really capable of dealing with the federal government. It's the 800-pound gorilla. So there's actually a consortium of 8 southeastern, maybe 10 regional states that have gotten together to try to get the federal government to think along those lines. The signals I'm getting from the EPA, although they've been very cordial and very nice, are that they've got an agenda. And our agenda is probably more data-based. Theirs is more computer model-based. And they're adamant about the fact that, especially for air quality, that their computer models are going to be the rule. So remember, everything we do at DENR is always tempered with the balance with the federal government because they are the 800-pound gorilla. But we are very much in the middle of that, and it's potentially quite problematic.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Yes, sir.
I was just vacationing in Pennsylvania where the Marcellus Shale Formation is pumping out much more natural gas than even the optimists thought possible. Can you update us on what the outlook is for fracking?
That's a great question, and certainly nothing without any controversy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
DENR is responsible for the oversight and support of the Mining and Energy Commission, which is the body that's been constituted to put the rules together for hydraulic extraction. Condensed as fracking. And just as a by the way, how long does fracking take? You know, you go down to the ground, what, 5,000 to 15,000 feet, and you break up the shale. How long does the process of fracking take where the water comes pumping back out? 3 days. How long do you extract the gas? 40 years. So everybody goes crazy over fracking, 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 and the reality is you break up the shale for 3 days and the water comes out and you do something with the water. And obviously it's become very clear that we're not going to re-inject that water on the coast and ruin the water on the coast. But the Mining and Energy Commission actually has been in existence for what, Jeff, a year, 2 years? At least. And so those rules and regulations are in progress. Under the General Assembly has retained the right to have ultimate say-so over those rules. It's our job to provide the support, the guidance, and the help to get those rules right. The legislature, the General Assembly, and the governor have all absolutely determined by law we are going to do hydraulic extraction. That's going to happen unless everybody gets voted out and somebody says stop. But assuming that's going forward, my answer is that we are the 37th state, I believe, to begin this process, probably late in the game. That means there's 36 other states with rules and regulations that we can copy and cheat and steal and grab the best practices. And I've seen it said, we want the most severe rules in the country. No, we don't want the most severe. We want the rules that are most appropriate to protect the environment in North Carolina. So I say we take 36 other templates, we modify it to the needs of North Carolina, and we go ahead and we try to harvest some of that resource because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And you know, they talk about the price of gas being very low and not economically viable to extract. Well, there's 2 components to that. One is there's dry gas and wet gas. And if we've got wet gas, Katie bar the door. And 2, there's a helium component to the dry gas that also is very valuable, that could be extractable irrespective of the dry gas prices being low. And apparently the way the formations are in North Carolina, there's a high probability of not only wet gas but helium component. It could be the panacea from heaven. I mean, it could create billions of dollars in economic vitality for our state.
Okay, final question. Who wants it?
Yes, sir. This gentleman didn't get a chance.
Is the governor going to sign the rec form?
Yes.
Mr. Secretary?